Stop the scroll. Have you ever underestimated someone so profoundly that your entire world collapsed? Get ready for the story of Julian Vance, a man who thought he had it all. Power, fortune, and a trophy wife. What he didn't know was that the woman who sat across from him every morning, the one he so casually dismissed, was about to unleash a corporate storm that would consume his entire life. This isn't just a tale of revenge. It's a symphony of poetic justice that will leave you breathless. Julian Vance straightened his $1,000 Hermes tie, a predator surveying his domain. The polished mahogany of the boardroom table reflected his confident smirk. Beside him, his ambitious and beautiful protégé. Chloe Cruz gave his hand a subtle squeeze under the table. This meeting was his launchpad. He was about to present his 5-year growth strategy to the mysterious new CEO of their acquiring parent company, Apex Strategies. A promotion to senior vice president was practically in his pocket. He just had to impress a corporate titan he'd never met. He leaned towards his rival, Robert Sanders, whispering with a smug chuckle, "I wish my wife could see this. She thinks my biggest decision of the day is what to order for the lunch catering." Little did he know, the most important decision of his day had already been made by the very woman he so lightly disdained. The boardroom doors were about to open, and his entire world was about to burn to the ground. Question: do you think people who focus solely on corporate power always end up ignoring the most important things in their personal lives? Let us know your opinion in the comments. The gilded cage in Manhattan. The pale, indifferent morning sun filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the luxury penthouse in Manhattan's Upper East Side that Julian Vance called home. It was a space designed for a magazine cover. Sharp lines, muted colors, and cold, impersonal art. A testament to success, a monument to ambition, and as sterile as an operating room. Julian stood before a full-length mirror, knotting a spilled wine-colored silk tie. Every movement was precise, practiced, a reflection of a man who believed he held total control over his universe. "Eliza, have you seen my silver cufflinks? The ones from the Geneva trip?" he asked, his voice echoing slightly in the cavernous space. He didn't turn around. He simply admired his reflection, checking the fit of his Italian suit. From the kitchen, a gleaming stainless steel and marble space that rarely saw actual cooking, appeared Eliza Santos. She wore simple gray yoga pants and a faded cotton t-shirt. Her dark hair was pulled back in a loose ponytail, her face free of makeup. To a stranger, she was the picture of a comfortable, modest homemaker. To Julian, she was part of the decor. He had stopped noticing her long ago. "They're in your travel kit on the dresser, where they always are," she said, her voice even and quiet. She held a cup of black coffee, steam curling around her fingers. Julian grunted, finding them exactly where she said. "Right. Big day today. The final presentation to the new Apex CEO. This is it, Eli. The leap to the C-suite. Everything I've been working for." "I'm sure you'll be wonderful, Julian," she replied, taking a slow sip of her coffee. There was no emotion in her voice, just a calm, observing tone he found perpetually irritating. It was as if she were watching a play rather than living in the same reality as him. "You could try to sound a little more excited," he chided, finally turning to face her. He scanned her appearance with a slight, almost imperceptible frown. "You know this apartment, your charity luncheons, the life you have. It's all thanks to these big days." Eliza's deep, intelligent blue eyes met his. There was a flicker of something in them, neither anger nor sadness, but something far more complex. It was a look he hadn't been able to decipher in years. "I am aware of what you provide me, Julian. I've never forgotten that." The subtext was lost on him, or perhaps he chose to ignore it. He only saw the unassuming woman before him, the one who had abandoned her own promising career in software engineering 15 years ago when he received his first major promotion. It was his narrative, polished and perfected. He had ascended, and she had consented. He had generously allowed her to retire to a life of leisure while he battled industry titans. "I have to bring Chloe with me," he stated, the assertion sounding more like a declaration than a request for opinion. She was instrumental in compiling the data for the presentation. It's good exposure for a junior analyst. Eliza's expression didn't change. She just nodded slowly. "Chloe Cruz, the blonde from the marketing department, the one you mentored at the Aspen Company retreat." Julian felt a brief, unpleasant jolt. He hadn't realized Eliza paid that much attention. "Yes, that's the one. She's brilliant, eager to learn." He conveniently omitted that Chloe was 26, adored the ground he walked on, and had spent the previous night in a hotel suite with him, celebrating his pre-victory. "Well, I hope her exposure is educational," Eliza said, turning to place her mug in the sink. The words were simple, but they floated in the air with a strange weight. Julian dismissed it as another one of her passive-aggressive moods. He grabbed his leather brief bag, the scent of expensive cologne trailing after him. He paused at the door, looking at his wife. She stood with her back to him, contemplating the sprawling Manhattan skyline. For one fleeting moment, she seemed like a stranger in her own home. "Don't wait up," he said. The words were a familiar refrain. "It'll be a long day of meetings followed by a celebratory dinner." "Oh, I won't," Eliza replied, her voice soft but clear. "I have a very busy day planned too. You have no idea." He let out a scoffing, short, condescending laugh. "Right. Shopping at Bergdorf Goodman or planning another fundraiser? Don't overexert yourself." He shut the door behind him, the solid click sealing him out of her world and her inside the gilded cage he had so carefully constructed. He walked to the elevator, a triumphant smirk on his face, imagining Chloe waiting for him in the lobby, her eyes bright with admiration and something more. He felt powerful, untouchable, the king of his castle. Meanwhile, Eliza remained at the window, watching her husband's black sedan pull away from the curb, 40 floors below. She took a deep breath, the first truly relaxed one she had taken all morning. She pulled the hair tie out, letting her dark hair fall over her shoulders. She walked over to the sleek, minimalist coffee table and picked up a tablet. With a few taps, she opened a file. It was the complete acquisition portfolio for Nexus Corp, Julian's company, by Apex Strategies. She scrolled until she found his name. Julian Vance, Vice President of Marketing. A small, cold smile touched her lips. "Enjoy your celebration, Julian," she whispered to the opulent, empty room. "It's the last one you'll have for a long time." Then, she checked her calendar. Her first appointment at 10:00 a.m. was marked in bold. Board meeting. Presentation to Nexus Corp. Executive staff. The drive to the downfall. Chloe's revelation. The leather seats of Julian's Mercedes were the color of rich cream, a stark contrast to the vibrant red of Chloe Cruz's dress. The dress was a strategic choice, bold enough to be memorable, but elegant enough to scream ambition rather than desperation. "Nervous?" Chloe asked, her voice a low murmur. She traced a perfectly manicured finger over the dashboard. Julian laughed, a deep, confident sound that filled the car. "Nervous, Chloe. Nervousness is for the unprepared. We've gone over this presentation 100 times. The numbers are solid. My strategy is revolutionary. This new CEO, whoever they are, will have no choice but to be impressed." He casually emphasized the whoever they are, a dismissive assumption based on the aggressive acquisition tactics Apex Strategies was known for. "And me?" she asked, turning in her seat to look at. "Will they be impressed with me?" "They'll see a sharp, dedicated analyst supporting her VP," he said, reaching out to place a possessive hand on her knee. "Just stick to the script. Let me do the talking unless you're addressed. Answer concisely. Look smart. That's all you have to do. This is my show." Chloe's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. She craved the spotlight, but understood the hierarchy. For now, she was his accessory, the brilliant yet subordinate mind that helped the great Julian Vance achieve his destiny. Her time would come. She believed his promises that once he was promoted, he would create a new director role just for her, and that he would finally leave his boring, passionless wife. "Eliza didn't seem to mind that you were bringing me," she said, testing the waters as she often did. "She never suspects." Julian scoffed, his eyes on the traffic. "Eli stopped paying attention a decade ago. She lives in her little world of charity galas and book clubs. I doubt she even remembers your name. To her, you're just some intern I'm magnanimously giving a career boost. It's the perfect cover." The phrase, "the perfect cover," hurt Chloe more than she let on. She wasn't a cover. She was the future. She was the one who understood his ambition, who matched his drive. Eliza was a relic, a ghost of a past life he hadn't quite managed to shed. She just seemed so placid, Chloe mused. When I saw her at the company Christmas party, she barely spoke. Just stood there smiling. It was a little sad. "It's not sad. It's comfortable," Julian corrected. "She has everything a woman could want without having to lift a finger. I gave her that. She should be grateful." He truly believed it. His guilt over the affair was a tiny, shriveled thing, easily overshadowed by his sense of magnanimity. In his mind, he was providing for two women. He was a modern patriarch. They soon left the congested city streets, turning onto the private access road leading to the Apex Strategies corporate tower. The building was a spear of smoked glass and obsidian steel that pierced the New York skyline. It was a declaration of pure, unadulterated power, dwarfing Nexus Corp's more modest headquarters. As Julian pulled into his reserved underground parking spot, a valet rushed to open their doors. Chloe felt a genuine shiver of awe. This was the major leagues. This was where fortunes were made and empires were forged. "All right," Julian said, turning to her before stepping out. He looked her up and down, his eyes lingering on the tightness of her dress. "You look perfect. Remember the plan. We're a team, but I'm the captain. Follow my lead, and tonight we'll celebrate your future boss's promotion to senior VP." He sealed the promise with a quick, hard kiss that tasted of coffee and ambition. Remember to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the climax of this story. Black Pawn. The Black Pawn. The Great Reveal. They ascended in the silent, high-speed elevator to the 60th floor, the penthouse level. The doors opened not to a reception area, but directly into a vast, minimalist atrium with a panoramic view of the city. The air was cool and smelled faintly of ozone and money. A severe-looking woman with a sharp haircut and a tablet greeted them. "Mr. Vance? Ms. Cruz, welcome to Apex. The board is assembled. Please follow me." She led them down a hallway lined with abstract art that likely cost more than Julian's car. Everyone they passed was impeccably dressed, moving with a quiet urgency. The atmosphere was electric, a stark contrast to Nexus Corp. Zoff in complacent culture, Julian felt his own confidence swell. He belonged here. This was his natural habitat. He gave Chloe a reassuring wink. He was her guide in this rarefied world, her benefactor. The assistant stopped at a pair of imposing frosted glass doors. "They are ready for you. Mr. Soto is already inside." Robert Soto was the outgoing CEO of Nexus Corp, a man in his 60s, happy to take his golden parachute and retire to the Hamptons. He was a formality, a bridge between the old and the new. The real power, the person Julian had to conquer, waited behind those doors. Julian smoothed his suit jacket, took a deep breath, and pushed the door open. Stepping into the brightest, most intimidating boardroom he had ever seen. The Apex Strategies boardroom was less a room and more a theater for corporate warfare. One entire wall was a seamless glass panel, offering a godlike view of the city. The table was a single, colossal slab of polished granite, so dark it seemed to absorb light. Seated around it were a dozen people who radiated an aura of quiet, lethal competence. These were the Apex executives. At the head of the table sat Robert Soto, looking more like a guest than a host. Julian scanned the faces. There was the CFO, a severe-looking man in his 50s. The head of legal, a woman with keen, intelligent eyes, Sylvia Thorne, and several other VPs he recognized from industry publications. They were the sharks, and he was here to prove he was one of them. "Julian, so good of you to join us," Robert Soto said, his voice a little too loud in the silent room. "Everyone, this is Julian Vance, our VP of Marketing at Nexus Corp, and his analyst, Chloe Cruz." Cold, assessing nods were exchanged. Julian felt a dozen pairs of eyes evaluating him, and he met them with his most charming, confident smile. He and Chloe took the two empty seats opposite the core board members. He placed his sleek laptop and leather portfolio on the table, his movements economical and self-assured. Robert Sanders, his internal rival and VP of Operations, sat a few chairs away. Robert gave him a tight, professional nod. Julian saw the flicker of jealousy in Robert's eyes and savored it. Robert had come alone. Julian, on the other hand, had brought his star protege, a visual testament to his leadership and eye for talent. "We are just waiting for our new CEO to join us," Sylvia Thorne, the legal counsel, stated. Her voice was crisp and brooked no argument. "She is finishing up a call with our Tokyo office. She will—" The word "she" registered in Julian's mind with a jolt of surprise. He had automatically assumed the new boss would be a man. A female CEO in this aggressive tech acquisition space was rare. He mentally recalibrated. This was even better. In his experience, he was excellent at charming, powerful women, at playing the role of the indispensable, brilliant male subordinate. To fill the silence, Robert Soto began to offer compliments. "Julian has been with Nexus for 12 years, a real pillar of the company. His marketing strategies were key to our growth in the early 2010s. It was faint praise that referenced past glories. Julian felt a spike of irritation. He was about to unveil the future, not revisit the past. He directed a charming smile toward Sylvia Thorne. "Robert is too kind. The past is prologue. I'm far more excited to discuss the next 5 years. We are poised to penetrate the South American market in a way no one has anticipated." Before anyone could respond, he leaned slightly toward Robert Sanders, dropping his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. Loud enough for those nearby to hear. "It's another level up here, isn't it? Makes you feel sorry for those left behind. I spoke to Eli this morning. She was agonizing over which caterer to use for a luncheon. Bless her heart." He shook his head with a look of fond exasperation. "Different worlds." Robert offered an evasive grunt, but Julian knew the seed was planted. He was painting a picture of himself, a high flyer unencumbered by domestic triviality. Being married to a simple homemaker who managed the house while he conquered the world was part of his personal brand. Chloe, sitting beside him, suddenly felt relieved, sensing the implied contrast. She was part of the real world, his world. The tension in the room suddenly shifted. A palpable wave of deference and respect washed over the Apex executives as they subtly straightened in their chairs, their eyes pivoting toward the frosted glass doors. The quiet chatter ceased. "Looks like it's showtime," Robert Soto murmured, with a hint of relief in his tone. Julian felt a rush of adrenaline. His moment had arrived. He smoothed his tie one last time, squared his shoulders, and focused on the entrance. He prepared his power smile, the one that conveyed respect and ambition in equal measure. This woman, whoever she was about to meet the man who would be the most valuable asset in her newly acquired company. He would make himself undeniable. The heavy glass doors slid open with a faint hydraulic whoosh. A pair of expensive-looking, yet understated black heels clicked determinedly on the marble floor. They were followed by the sharp crease of a navy pantsuit, tailored with a precision that denoted immense wealth and a refusal to compromise. The woman who entered was tall and moved with an unshakable composure that instantly commanded the room. Her dark hair, which Julian had last seen in a messy ponytail, was swept back into a sleek, neat chignon at the nape of her neck. Her face, bare that morning, was now skillfully and minimally enhanced to highlight her strong cheekbones and piercing blue eyes. She was not smiling. Her expression was one of cold, detached authority. She walked to the head of the table, her gaze sweeping over the assembled executives, acknowledging each with a slight, almost imperceptible nod, and then her eyes landed on him. For one horrible, paralyzing second, Julian Vance's world stopped spinning. The blood drained from his face, replaced by an icy dread that started in his stomach and spread through his veins. His confident smile dissolved, his mouth slightly ajar. The room, the table, the people, everything blurred into a meaningless backdrop. There was only her, the unassuming homemaker, the woman he thought was deciding on canapés. His wife. She stopped at the head of the table, placing a slim tablet in front of her. Her voice, when she spoke, was not the soft, familiar tone he heard over breakfast. It was a voice tuned for command, crisp, clear, and edged with steel. "Good morning, everyone. I apologize for the delay. Thank you all for being here. For those of Nexus Corp, whom I have not had the pleasure of meeting, my name is Eliza Santos. I am the founder and CEO of Apex Strategies." She paused, letting her name, her dear maiden name, and her title sink in. Her cold blue eyes then moved deliberately around the table, past the other executives, past the stunned face of Robert Sanders, past the utter confusion of Chloe, and locked directly onto her husband. A flash of something cold and sharp passed through them before she addressed him directly. Her voice sliced through the stunned silence of the room. "Mr. Vance, it is a pleasure to finally meet you in a professional capacity." The words, "Mr. Vance," hit Julian with the force of a physical blow. It was the name of a stranger, a subordinate, a line item on a balance sheet. In that single, formal address, 15 years of shared history, of intimacy and marriage, evaporated. He was no longer Julian, her husband. He was Mr. Vance, the employee. Call to action. Tell us in the comments. What would be your first move if your dismissed spouse turned out to be your new CEO? The annihilation. The presentation. Dissected. Julian's mind scrambled frantically, trying to piece together the collapsing puzzle. Eliza Santos. Santos, her maiden name, the name on her old college degrees, the ones he had tucked away in a box in the attic, artifacts of a life he thought she had left behind. Apex Santos. The connection was so obvious, so insultingly simple, it had never occurred to him to make it. The woman in the power suit who looked like his wife, but felt like an alien queen. The quiet observer at his breakfast table was gone. In her place was a formidable executive who held his entire future in the palm of her hand. The condescending joke he'd made to Robert Sanders moments earlier replayed in his head. every word a self-inflicted wound. The humiliation was a physical sensation, a hot flush that crawled up his neck and burned his ears. Beside him, Chloe was a statue of confusion. She looked from Eliza to Julian and back again. Frowning, the resemblance was undeniable, but the context was impossible. She saw the blood draining from Julian's face, the rigid dread in his posture. A sickening, mounting realization began to curdle in her stomach. This powerful, intimidating woman. It couldn't be. Eliza showed no emotion. She was the picture of corporate control. "Let us begin," she said, her gaze sweeping the room again, deliberately avoiding Julian. "Now, as you all know, Apex Strategies has officially completed the acquisition of Nexus Corp. For many of you at Apex, this is business as usual. For our new colleagues at Nexus, I understand it is a time of uncertainty. Let me be clear, my goal is not to dismantle what you have built, but to identify your core strengths, cut your considerable fat, and integrate your viable assets into our global strategy." The phrase, "cut your considerable fat," hung in the air like a guillotine blade. All the Nexus executives shifted uncomfortably. A cold sweat broke out on Julian's brow. "I have spent the last 6 weeks conducting a thorough analysis of every department," Eliza continued, tapping her tablet. A huge screen behind her lit up with complex charts and data flows. "Finance, operations, R&D, and marketing. I have read every report, analyzed every metric, and reviewed every 5-year plan. Which brings us to today's agenda." Her hawkish eyes finally landed on Julian again. "Mr. Vance, I believe you have a presentation for us on a proposed South American market expansion." It was a command, not a request. Julian's throat was dry. His hands on his laptop trembled slightly. All the confidence, the arrogance he had walked in with, had evaporated. He felt naked, exposed, a fool in a $1,000 suit. He looked at the faces around the table. The Apex executives watched him with predatory curiosity. Robert Sanders stared grimly at the table, refusing to look at Julian, affording him the small mercy of not witnessing his complete and utter annihilation. And Chloe. He risked a look at her. Her face was pale, her lipstick suddenly garish. The confusion in her eyes had been replaced by the horrible realization of a person who willingly walked into a trap. The boring, placid wife was the CEO. The woman he had dismissed as a sad relic was about to decide his fate. "Mr. Vance," Eliza's voice was sharp, now impatient. Gathering every last shred of his professional facade, Julian cleared his throat. "No, I'm fine. Of course. My apologies, Madam CEO." The honorific felt acidic on his tongue. He opened his laptop, his fingers fumbling on the keys. The presentation he had been so proud of now felt puerile. A child's crayon drawing presented to a master artist. He clicked the file open. The slide title, Nexus Corp, Conquering New Frontiers, authored by Chloe Cruz, flashed onto the main screen. It felt like a sick joke. He was the one who had been conquered. "Please," Eliza said, gesturing to the screen to proceed. "Dazzle us." Her voice was laced with an irony so cold, so sharp it could have cut diamonds. Julian began to speak, his voice a strained, hollow version of his usual confident tone. He tried to fall back on the familiar cadence of his pitch, the practiced words and compelling narrative he and Chloe had rehearsed until it flowed naturally. But the words felt alien in his mouth, the concepts fragile and transparent. Every assertion of projected growth and synergistic opportunity sounded like a desperate lie under Eliza's unblinking scrutiny. She let him speak for exactly 7 minutes. He was just reaching his crescendo about the market penetration strategy for Brazil when her voice cut across his presentation like a surgeon's scalpel. "Mr. Vance." Question. He stopped mid-sentence. Yes, Madam CEO. Eliza swiped a finger across her tablet, and the main screen behind her instantly changed. His meticulously crafted slide was replaced by a dizzying array of spreadsheets and market analysis reports. Your entire projection for the Brazilian market relies on 15% annual growth in the consumer electronics sector, with a primary focus on the affluent urban demographic. Is that correct? Ah, yes, our data indicates— What data? She interjected, her tone clinical. Because my data, compiled from 3 independent global analytics firms, indicates that sector growth has stagnated at 4% for the past 18 months, with a projected ceiling of 5% for the next 3 years due to recent tariff implementations. Furthermore, the most significant growth is not in the affluent urban sector, which is already saturated, but in the emerging middle class in secondary cities, a demographic your plan entirely ignores. A murmur ran through the Apex executives. They were looking at the data on the screen, then back at Julian, their expressions ranging from disappointment to sheer disdain. Additionally, Eliza continued, unyielding, your proposed distribution and logistics partner, a company named Blue Logistics, is currently under federal investigation for bribery and is teetering on bankruptcy. Did your due diligence not uncover this? Julian froze. That was a detail Chloe should have verified. He shot her a panicked look. Chloe looked like she wanted the floor to swallow her whole. Her face was ashen. She was shrinking in her seat, trying to become invisible. We were assured of their stability, Julian stammered, the excuse sounding pathetic even to his own ears. Assured? Eliza's eyebrow arched slightly. Apex does not operate on assurances, Mr. Vance. It operates on verifiable facts. Your proposed marketing budget, 50 million euros for the first year, is not only inflated, it's targeted at the wrong people in the wrong places using a potentially criminal partner. Other than that, it's a stellar plan. The sarcasm was devastating. Some of the Apex board members couldn't suppress faint, cruel smiles. Eliza was not done. She systematically and emotionlessly dismantled his entire presentation. She questioned his ad spending, pointing out his media buy plan was based on 3-year-old audience data. She shredded his staffing plan, noting he had budgeted for a massive new office in Sao Paulo, completely failing to consider a more cost-effective remote workforce, a model Apex had perfected. With every point she made, she wasn't just destroying his professional credibility, she was annihilating the central myth of their marriage. He was the brilliant businessman, the industry titan. She was the homemaker. But in this room, it was clear who possessed the superior intellect, the sharper instincts, and the more rigorous work ethic. He had been playing checkers while she was mastering multi-dimensional chess. Finally, she turned her attention to the projections. Ms. Cruz, her voice said, making Chloe jump in her seat. I see you are co-author of this report. Chloe swallowed hard, her voice a tiny squeak. These sales projections, Eliza said, circling a number on the screen with a digital red pen. A 400% market share increase in 2 years. What model did you use to arrive at this figure? It was a proprietary algorithm based on synergistic market capture, Chloe managed, reciting a meaningless buzzword they had concocted to sound impressive. Eliza's expression remained unreadable. A proprietary algorithm? I see. You may show it to me. Or is the formula as fictitious as the growth it predicts? Chloe's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. She was completely outmatched. She was a junior analyst who had been so dazzled by her affair with a senior VP that she had neglected her work, assuming his authority would shield her from scrutiny. She had never imagined being vetted by a CEO who actually read the fine print. The illusion was shattered. Julian was not a god. He was a fraud. And she had hitched her career, her reputation, to him. Promises of a directorship and a future together now seemed like a cruel joke. She felt used, not for her body, but for her complicity. She had been the fool, the ambitious, eager woman who had half-assed her homework for him. Eliza turned her cold gaze back to Julian. Your strategy, Mr. Vance, is not merely flawed. It is lazy. It is a work of deep arrogance built on antiquated assumptions and an astonishing lack of diligence. It is the kind of work I would expect from a company that is failing, which I suppose is why I was able to acquire it at such a favorable price. She dropped the final insult, and the silence in the room was absolute. Robert Soto paled, realizing the company he had run for 20 years was being branded a sinking ship. Eliza closed her tablet. The screen behind her went blank. The execution was over. That will be all for the group presentation. The Apex team and I will now break for a strategy session. Mr. Soto, you are welcome to join us. Mr. Sanders, I would also like you to stay. I have some questions about Nexus's operational efficiencies. She stood up, a clear dismissal. Mr. Vance, Ms. Cruz. The words hung in the air. You are excused. Dismissed like schoolchildren. All the other Nexus executives were being invited to stay, to consult, to be part of the future. But not him. Not the great VP of marketing. Dazed, Julian closed his laptop. He couldn't force himself to look at anyone. He could feel the weight of their judgment, their pity, their scorn. He rose on shaking legs. Chloe scrambled to collect her things. Her hands trembled so badly she dropped her pen, which rolled under the massive table. She didn't dare retrieve it. She just wanted to escape. As Julian walked toward the door, his professional life in ruins, Eliza's voice stopped him one last time. It was softer now, yet no less commanding. Actually, Mr. Vance, a word in my office now. Chloe fled the room without looking back. The heavy glass doors closed behind her, leaving Julian alone with his wife, his new boss, and the shattered fragments of his once perfect life. The correction, the final closure. Eliza's private office was adjacent to the boardroom. It was even more stunning. A corner suite, with 2 walls of glass that made you feel as if you were floating above the city. The decor was minimal and tasteful. A large oak desk, a few carefully chosen modern art pieces, and shelves lined not with awards, but with books on economics, philosophy, and engineering. It was the office of a thinker, a builder. Julian entered like a condemned man, his footsteps silent on the plush gray carpet. Eliza walked past him to stand by the window, her back to him, looking out over the city. The power dynamic was absolute. She did not offer him a seat. The silence stretched for a long, agonizing minute. Julian's mind raced, searching for a strategy, an angle, a way to salvage this nightmare. Should he apologize, beg, feign ignorance, rage? Every option felt futile. 15 years ago, Julian, Eliza finally said, her voice quiet and reflective. She was no longer the glacial CEO, but something far more dangerous, the wronged woman. 15 years ago, I had just received a patent for a data compression algorithm that was going to revolutionize the industry. I had venture capitalists lining up. I was 28. She turned from the window to face him. Her expression was not rage, but weariness, as if she were examining a disappointing specimen. And then you got that senior director promotion. You said we had to move to Manhattan. You said you needed my support. You said one career in the family was enough, and yours was already on a clear trajectory. You asked me to choose. Eli, he started, his voice cracking. No, she said, raising a hand. Let me finish. I was in love. I was naive. I believed in partnership. So I chose you. I put my patent in a drawer. I put my dreams on hold. And I became Mrs. Eliza Vance, the perfect corporate wife. I hosted the dinners. I charmed your bosses. I created the serene, effortless home life that allowed you to focus solely on your ambition. Every word was a perfectly placed stone, building a wall between them. For a while, I even believed the story you told everyone. She continued, stepping closer. That I had simply retired. That I was happy with my charity work and book clubs. But then I started seeing it. The condescension, the little jokes at my expense, the way you would explain simple financial concepts to me as if I were a child. You didn't just want a supportive wife, Julian. You wanted a smaller one. You needed me to be small so you could feel big. He flinched. The truth of her words was undeniable. He had done as he had all those things. I started getting bored, she said, her voice turning colder. And then, about 5 years ago, I got angry. So I pulled out that old patent. I used the inheritance my parents left me, the money you always called my little hobby fund, and I set up a small consultancy out of the den you never used. I hired 2 brilliant young programmers. I worked while you were on your business trips and late client dinners. The pieces snapped into place with sickening clarity. The nights she spent on her laptop that he dismissed as online shopping. Her frequent lunches with friends in the financial district. It had all been happening right under his nose. Santos Consulting grew into Apex Strategies, she stated simply. We don't just invest. We build. We create. We innovate. While you were busy rearranging the deck chairs on a stagnant company, I was building a fleet of battleships. And when the opportunity to acquire Nexus Corp came up, well, the irony was too delicious to pass up. Finally, Julian's dam of shock broke, replaced by a desperate, sputtering rage. So, this whole thing is an elaborate revenge plot. You bought my company just to humiliate me because I had an affair? Eliza laughed. A short, sharp, humorless sound. An affair, Julian? You are so incredibly arrogant. Do you think this is about Chloe Cruz? She is a symptom, not the disease. I have known about your affairs for years. Tiffany, the paralegal 2 years ago, the one from HR before that. You are as predictable as you are pathetic. Your infidelity was just the confirmation of what I already knew. Our marriage was an empty shell, a business arrangement where I was the silent, unpaid partner. She walked to her desk and picked up a thick manila envelope, extending it to him. This is not about revenge, Julian. This is about a course correction. My course correction. He didn't take the envelope. He knew what it was. Those are divorce papers, she said. My lawyers will be contacting yours. The penthouse is in my name. My inheritance assets are protected. You will receive exactly what you are entitled to under the prenuptial agreement we signed, which, if you recall, you insisted upon to protect your future earnings. As for your professional life, her CEO persona returned. Your performance today was abysmal. Your department is bloated and ineffective. Your leadership is based on ego, not results. You are a liability, not an asset to my company. However, firing you on day one would be messy. So, here is what will happen. Your department will be restructured effective immediately. Your role as VP of Marketing is redundant. We are creating a new temporary position for you. Special Projects Consultant, reporting directly to Robert Sanders. The perfect final humiliation. He would report to his rival. You will be tasked with overseeing the orderly transition of assets and accounts until your position is eliminated in 3 to 6 months. Your bonus is rescinded. Your stock options are now under the control of the new parent company. You will clear out your office by the end of the week. Is that clear, Mr. Vance? Julian stood there, utterly defeated. He had lost his wife, his mistress, his job, his reputation, and his dignity in the span of a single morning. The man who had entered the building as a king was leaving as less than a commoner. He was a ghost, a footnote in the story of Eliza Santos's meteoric rise. "Eli, please," he whispered the name, a desperate plea for a connection that was no longer there. Eliza looked at him one last time, her blue eyes showing not a shred of pity, only a deep, final sense of closure. "My name," she said, her voice as hard and beautiful as a diamond, "is E. Santos." Epilogue. The STEM legacies. 6 months later, the Manhattan autumn gave way to the first hints of winter. The view from the 60th floor office of Apex Strategies was crystal clear. Eliza Santos stood at the window, not as a prisoner in a gilded cage, but as a sovereign inspecting her realm. The company thrived under her leadership. She had cut the fat from Nexus Corp, as promised, and reinvested in its R&D core, breathing new life into a company that had been slowly suffocating under complacent, self-serving management. Julian Vance's tenure as a special projects consultant had quietly ended. It was, by all accounts, a profoundly humiliating experience for him. Stripped of his title, his corner office, and his authority, he had been forced to watch the company he thought he knew be transformed by the wife he thought he owned. He had done the work assigned to him with a grim, joyless efficiency, a ghost haunting the halls of his former kingdom. A year after the acquisition, Eliza's phone pinged with a message from Sylvia Thorne. It was a link to an industry blog with a brief note. "Thought you'd find this amusing." Eliza tapped the link. The article was a dry piece about the quarterly earnings of a mid-tier logistics firm based in Boston. Her eyes scanned the text until she found the name mentioned in a short paragraph about the company's new regional sales team. Julian Olmedo, the name he used after the divorce. He had been hired as a senior account manager. It was a respectable job, but a stunning fall from grace for a man who had once been a VP on the cusp of the C-suite. He was no longer in the glossy pages of business magazines, but buried in the fine print of a minor trade publication. Eliza felt a brief, clinical flash of something. Not pity, but a distant recognition of a deserved fate. It was an echo of a life that no longer felt like hers, a ghost story whose power to frighten had long faded. She closed the article and turned her attention to the documents on her desk. They were the first annual reports for her STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math mentoring program. Applications had tripled. 3 of her first mentees had just received full scholarships to MIT. This was her true legacy. It wasn't in the destruction of one man's ego, but in the building of futures for countless brilliant young women. She was building an empire not only of profit, but of potential. The snow continued to fall, burying the old world and promising a new one. Eliza Santos picked up her pen, a faint smile on her lips, and returned to work. The echo of Julian Vance's name now long forgotten. 3 years later, Eliza Santos was no longer simply a CEO, but a global authority. She was sitting in her New York office preparing for a major merger announcement when her assistant called. "Ms. Santos, we have a very unusual email. It's from a regional consulting firm in Chicago. They've submitted a pitch for a major market data synergy project. You told me to personally vet all important new pitches, and this one stands out." "How so?" Eliza asked, scrolling through an unrelated financial document. "The core analytical framework is structurally sound, highly original, and mathematically elegant," the assistant reported. "Frankly, it's the best synthesis of emerging data we've seen this year. But the name of the principal consultant is Chloe Cruz." Eliza paused, her finger resting on the screen. Chloe Cruz, the ambitious, dazzling junior analyst who had been Julian's accomplice and who had fled Nexus the morning of the collapse. Eliza hadn't destroyed Chloe's career, allowing her to find work in a smaller market, a deliberate act of choosing correction over annihilation. "Display her firm's profile," Eliza commanded. The profile appeared. Chloe's firm was small, independent, and clearly successful. The arrogance had been replaced by a quiet professionalism in her corporate photo. "She has done good work," Eliza observed quietly. "The analysis is stellar. It is precisely the diligence that Julian lacked." The team noted her history with Mr. Vance and the Nexus debacle, the assistant carefully pointed out. "They want to know if we should red flag the proposal over ethical concerns." Eliza leaned back in her chair, a slight smile touching her lips. This was the true test of her philosophy. Her anger toward Julian was extinguished. He had paid the price of irrelevance. But Chloe was still a liability, a living connection to old wounds. "No," Eliza decided. "Forward the proposal to Robert Sanders. Tell him to vet the numbers and the legal framework, but to ignore the historical ethical concerns. I want a full breakdown of the project's viability." 2 hours later, Robert Sanders, the new COO, entered her office, holding the proposal. "The numbers are flawless, Eliza. It's brilliant work. It will save us 15% in Q4. And the principal consultant?" Robert, who had witnessed Julian's humiliation firsthand, hesitated. "The name is awkward, but if you're asking me if she is capable of performing at an apex level, yes, she is." "Then we will proceed," Eliza confirmed. "But there will be one condition. We will absorb the proposal and her firm's team, integrating them under a 2-year contract. Chloe Cruz will report directly to you, Robert. You will mentor her. Her past association with the Nexus failures must be permanently overridden by her demonstrable competence at Apex." Robert nodded, understanding the subtle brilliance of the order. Eliza was not rewarding Chloe, nor was she punishing her. She was validating the work while imposing a rigorous structure, a way to ensure Chloe's ambition was funneled purely into results with no room for personal politics. Eliza Santos had moved past petty revenge to the point where she could now extract value from the very people who had once helped tear her life down. She saw Chloe not as a rival or a threat, but as a repurposed asset, a talented mind who had paid her dues and was now worthy of investment. Her final victory wasn't just building Apex strategies. It was using that empire to build a future where competence, not comfort or cruelty, was the ultimate currency. Years turned into a decade. Eliza Santos was no longer just the CEO of Apex. She was a recognized leader whose data-driven ethics were reshaping global business practices. She sat in her London office, looking down at the intricate network of lights below, the city's arteries and veins. She had built her empire using one singular, brutal truth. Untapped potential is the highest form of negligence. She thought of Julian somewhere in Boston, a low-level manager whose life was now a footnote. She thought of Chloe, now a respected leader within Apex, who had paid the price of ambition but gained competence. She had turned the poison of their arrogance into fuel and the wreckage of her marriage into the foundation of a global power. Her greatest achievement was not the billions in assets, but the system she had created. A system that could recognize and cultivate value in the most unlikely of places, in a discarded patent, in an inheritance dismissed as a hobby fund, and even in a talented but misguided former rival. The final irony, she realized, was that Julian's insult, "You're comfortable, Eliza," had been right. He had mistaken her comfort for complacency. He had mistaken her patience for smallness. But true comfort, she had learned, was the absence of dependence on another person's fragile ego. It was the serene certainty that no external force could ever define or diminish her. Eliza raised her hand, looking at the familiar lines in her palm. The scars of the past were invisible. She had been freed by one man's arrogance and crowned by her own intellectual rigor. She wasn't just the CEO of Apex Strategies. She was the architect of the age of Equitas, a time where value, once underestimated, was destined to prevail. And in the silence of her skyscraper office, Eliza smiled. The story was over. Her legacy had begun. Final call to action. What a twist. What would you do if you discovered the person you thought was just part of the decor was actually the owner of your destiny? Comment below. Was Julian's humiliation a fair punishment, or was it excessive? If you loved this journey of poetic justice, share this video so more people can discover the power of underestimated potential. And of course, subscribe to our channel for more stories of success, revenge, the triumph of intelligence.